Only one human stepped forward when the alien queen asked for a mate for her cousin. The instant Princess Varasha's voice cracked through the hall of echoes, the entire chamber froze. Conversations ended mid-sentence. Movement stopped in half-steps. It felt like the air itself turned solid. Starborn royalty never showed fear. They never trembled. They never begged. But tonight, Varasha did. Her glowing markings dimmed as she tried to speak again. The great crystal pillars around her caught every shaky word and bounced it back across the hall, making her desperation impossible to hide. Hundreds of starborn nobles stood in neat rows, tall and radiant, but none dared lift their gaze toward her. Behind Varasha stood Malar, her older cousin, the one the announcement was truly about. Malar kept her head low, posture calm, but there was something in the way she held her hands that revealed a long, silent pain. She had carried shame for years without letting anyone see her break. The hall felt colder because of it. Varasha tried to stand tall, but her voice trembled. "My cousin's final cycle is nearing its end," she said. "She cannot face another year alone. She needs a partner." No one moved. No one spoke. The nobles stared at the glowing floor patterns as if they suddenly found them more interesting than the princess herself. You could almost hear their thoughts: "Not my problem. Not my risk. Not my burden." The silence stretched so long it became painful. Then, somewhere in the room, someone snickered. The sound was small, but it cut the moment like a knife. Varasha flinched. Malar stiffened. A wave of discomfort rolled through the crowd, but still, not one male stepped forward. Varasha's voice cracked again. "Please, someone. Anyone. She deserves at least a chance." Her plea fell into the quiet like a wounded bird. Malar still didn't look up. She had lived too many years knowing exactly how this moment would go. She wasn't unwanted because of beauty or personality. She was simply older than what starborn males preferred. To them, she was no longer bright, no longer interesting, no longer ideal. And in their culture, remaining unpaired past a certain age was seen not as independence, but as failure. Your chest tightened as you watched. You didn't know their customs well, but you understood pain. You understood loneliness. And something in Malar's posture, silent, dignified, resigned, pulled at a part of you that didn't care about species or culture. Your heart reacted before your mind did. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't heroic. It was just human. A quiet, stubborn feeling rose inside your chest. A refusal to let someone be humiliated in front of her entire people. You tried to push the feeling down. This wasn't your world. This wasn't your place. But every time Varasha's voice shook, the feeling grew stronger. When Malar finally lifted her chin just enough to show her face, the decision snapped into place inside you. Her eyes weren't weak, they were simply tired. The tiredness of someone who had been told no too many times to count. You felt a strange courage fill your lungs. Varasha scanned the hall one last time. "Please," she whispered. "Is there no one?" The crowd stayed still. And then you stepped forward. A shockwave moved across the chamber. The crystal floor pulsed. Dozens of glowing eyes snapped toward you. A starborn elder even dropped his ceremonial rod with a sharp clang. Varasha looked stunned. Malar looked frozen. The entire hall stared as if reality itself had glitched. You walked toward the front with slow, steady steps. Your pulse raced, but your face stayed calm. When you reached the center, you looked at Varasha, then at Malar, and spoke the words that changed everything. "I will." The hall erupted in whispers: fear, disbelief, outrage, confusion. Malar's eyes rose fully for the first time, meeting yours like she wasn't sure you were real. In that moment, something shifted in the air. Something ancient. Something important. And every starborn in the room knew the night would not end the way they expected. A wave of shock rippled through the hall the moment those two words, "I will," left the human's mouth. It wasn't a loud reaction. It was a sharp, electric shift, like the air suddenly changed its temperature. Starborn nobles stared with wide, glowing eyes. Some whispered in sharp, broken breaths. Others stepped back as if a human volunteering was a dangerous event they were not prepared to witness. To them, the idea was impossible. Unnatural. Wrong. Humans in their eyes were unpredictable, too emotional, too bold, too willing to act without permission. Starborn males considered it unthinkable to let a human stand in a ceremony tied to legacy and lineage. And yet, you stood in the center of their sacred hall with calm determination. Princess Varasha's glow flickered wildly, a mix of disbelief and hope. She looked at you as if she wasn't sure whether to thank you, question you, or collapse in relief. Malar stared silently, her face unreadable. Not because she didn't care, but because she didn't dare believe something good could actually be happening. Above everyone, seated on her throne made of woven starlight, Queen Seralith leaned forward with the slow, deliberate movement of someone ancient and cautious. Energy swirled around her crown of bright root crystals as she studied you. "Human," she said, her voice deep and echoing. "Do you understand what your offer means?" Her tone was polite, but only barely. It carried a warning underneath. You nodded once. Steady. Clear. "I understand." The court stiffened. Guards half raised their weapons. Elders exchanged sharp glances that glowed in the dim light. Every instinct you had told you this was a moment of absolute danger, but also a moment where stepping back would be worse. Varasha swallowed hard. "You truly offer yourself?" she asked quietly. Her disbelief was almost painful. You met her eyes. "I do." The hall erupted again with soft pulses of colored light, signs of panic in starborn culture. Some nobles whispered things you couldn't understand. Others looked horrified, as if choosing Malar was a violation of some unspoken rule. One elder shook his head. "A human cannot stand for a starborn. It is imbalance." Another hissed, "Unwise. Illogical." But not a single one moved to replace you. Not one stepped forward to prove they were better. Varasha stepped closer, voice trembling. "Why would you choose her?" You hesitated for only a heartbeat, then answered simply. "Because no one else did." The queen's expression shifted, just slightly, but enough for the hall to feel it. Starborn didn't react to flattery. They reacted to sincerity. To them, truth in its simplest form was the sharpest blade. Seralith raised her staff, silencing the whispers. "No starborn may be paired without the ancient rites," she said. "If a human wishes to stand for Malar, then he must face the trials." A hush dropped over the crowd. Even Varasha's glow dimmed. Malar exhaled slowly, the first real sound she'd made. Her eyes met yours again, careful, uncertain, almost afraid for you. The queen turned toward a massive root door behind her throne. The living vines parted, revealing a long corridor of dim blue light pulsing like a heartbeat. "Enter the path of resonance," she commanded. "Alone. If you emerge, your offer will be accepted. If you fail, this matter ends forever." The hall felt like a giant creature holding its breath. Your pulse thudded. Your throat tightened. Fear whispered at the edges of your mind. But you looked at Malar, tired, quiet, resigned, and something steadier rose inside you. Courage. Simple, stubborn courage. You stepped forward. Malar's eyes widened with a soft flicker of violet. Not hope. Not relief. Something deeper, fear for you. The court leaned in, every noble watching. You crossed the threshold into the glowing corridor. The living door closed behind you with a gentle hiss. And the silence in the darkness told you the trials had already begun. The door sealed behind him with a soft hum, and the world changed immediately. The hall's noise vanished. The lights dimmed. The air shifted. It wasn't the silence of an empty room. It was the silence of something ancient, listening. The path of resonance stretched ahead like a long tunnel carved from living stone. Soft waves of blue light rippled across the walls in slow, steady pulses, giving the corridor the rhythm of a giant sleeping creature. The human took one careful step. The ground vibrated faintly beneath his boot, almost like a heartbeat answering his weight. The temperature dropped, and a thin mist curled across the floor, reacting to his presence. He lifted a hand and brushed the wall with the back of his fingers. And jerked back instantly. The stone pulsed under his touch. Warm. Alive. The Starborn loved to blend biology and architecture, but this felt older than anything built by their current civilization. This place felt like it remembered every footstep ever taken. As if it judged each soul that walked through. He swallowed and kept moving. The blue light ahead condensed, forming a drifting veil of tiny particles that hovered across the path like a living curtain. Inside its glow, faint shapes moved, like strands of memory swimming in water. There was no going back now. He stepped into the light. Warmth washed over him first, gentle and curious, as if the energy itself was smelling the edges of his thoughts. Tiny sparks brushed against his skin, tracing patterns across his arms and chest. The sensation wasn't painful, just unsettlingly intimate. Then the warmth deepened. It reached through him, touching hidden places he didn't know were still open. A whisper, not a voice, more like an emotion, slid through his chest. A question, silent and wordless. Who are you? What lives inside your heart? He felt memories rise without permission. Moments of courage. Moments of loneliness. Moments of choosing to help when no one else would. The veil pressed deeper, testing the weight of his choices, searching for weakness, looking for truth. The path didn't care about race or language. It cared about instinct. A single pulse of light pushed against his heart, recognizing the stubborn strength inside him. Then the corridor brightened, and the veil dissolved. He let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Sweat clung to his neck. His pulse thudded like he'd just run a mile. But the path was not finished. A door formed in the wall ahead, sliding open with a low rumble. He stepped through it into the second chamber, larger, circular, marked with glowing rings etched across the floor. They looked like the inside of an ancient tree, each line marking a long-forgotten moment. In the center stood a tall structure. Half pillar. Half living root. Its surface shimmered with violet pulses. He thought he was alone until the pillar shifted with a soft crack. It opened like a blooming flower. A shape formed, an elegant silhouette made of light and smoke. The outline of a starborn woman, but ethereal, impossible to touch. Her presence filled the room instantly. Her voice echoed inside his mind, soft but powerful. Human. You walk the path for Malar. Why? He steadied his breath. Because she deserves someone who chooses her. The figure stepped closer, her light drifting like mist. Choice is easy. Commitment is not. Her glow darkened as she circled him. Malar is not young. Her heart is not untouched. She carries years others do not value. Do you still stand for her? Yes. You understand she is not considered radiant by her own people? I do. You know she carries quiet scars? He nodded again. Yes. The projection paused. The room dimmed as if waiting for her judgment. Then she spoke more softly. Respect. Compassion. Patience. These she will require. Can you give these freely? I can. Silence. Then the figure bowed her head, the ancient sign of acceptance. The pillar closed, and the room brightened. A new passage opened behind it, glowing faintly like dawn breaking through fog. He didn't rush. He didn't hesitate either. He walked toward the final chamber, pulse steady, steps firm. But something in his chest told him the hardest part of the trial still waited ahead. And he would face it alone. The third chamber was smaller than the others, yet somehow far more intense. As soon as the human stepped inside, the door behind him sealed with a low, shuddering thump. The air felt heavier here, warm in a way that made his breath tighten. Soft violet light pulsed from the walls, matching a slow heartbeat rhythm. At the center of the room rested a circular stone platform, low to the ground, carved with two sets of hand-shaped hollows. The surface glowed faintly, like it was waiting for something, waiting for him. He approached the platform carefully. The stone was smooth, cool at first touch. But the moment his palms settled into the larger impressions, the heartstone reacted. Light flared beneath his hands and rushed up his arms in a warm surge that made his chest vibrate. A question pressed into his mind, deeper than words. Are you truthful? The stone tightened its glow, reading him. It searched his intentions. It measured every emotion he'd carried into the hall that night. His heartbeat synced with its rhythm. His breath slowed. His thoughts grew steady. He whispered, almost without meaning to, "I'm not here to lie." The heartstone pulsed brighter, as if acknowledging the honesty. The glow rose higher, warming the space around him. Then the chamber door in front of him opened, slowly, cautiously. And Malar stood there. Her breath caught the moment her eyes landed on him. She took one step into the chamber, her violet markings flickering in a soft, uneven pattern. Not excitement. Not hope. Something more fragile, fear for him. "You reached the heartstone," she said quietly. Her voice was gentle, like she was afraid of disturbing the air around them. "Most humans, they never make it this far." He managed a small shrug. "Maybe I didn't know I was supposed to fail." For a moment, something like a smile flickered across her eyes, though it didn't fully reach her lips. She stepped closer, gaze drifting to his hand still pressed into the glowing stone. "There is one more step," she murmured. "And it must be done together." He stepped slightly aside, giving her room. Malar hesitated. It wasn't fear of him, he could see that. It was fear that the heartstone might reject her, reject both of them, and humiliate her again in a way she wasn't sure she could survive. She finally placed her hands into the smaller impressions beside his. The reaction was instant. Light surged up around them like a wave of warm fire. The air thickened, buzzing with energy so strong it made the human's breath hitch. His pulse accelerated, only to match hers an instant later. The heartstone was merging their rhythms, testing whether two lives with different worlds, different histories, and different wounds could align. Malar gasped softly as the light wrapped around her arms. She looked shaken, unsteady, surprised by how deeply the stone's resonance sank into her chest. "This shouldn't be happening," she whispered. "The stone never reacts this strongly to a human." He kept his voice calm, even as the heat pressed against his ribs. "Maybe it thinks I belong here." Malar let out a tiny, involuntary sound, a half-laugh she tried to hide. Her fingers trembled, but she didn't pull away. Then everything stilled. A deep chime rang out, echoing through the chamber. The heartstone brightened, then slowly dimmed, releasing their hands with a final warm pulse. Malar stepped back, staring at him with an expression he had never seen on her face, something stunned, uncertain, quietly hopeful. "You passed," she breathed. "The heartstone accepted you." He wiped sweat from his palms. "Guess we're doing this for real." For a long moment, Malar simply stood there, trying to understand the weight of what had just happened. She wasn't glowing brightly like the younger starborn. She didn't shine with dramatic emotion. But her eyes. Her eyes held something new. Something warm. Something she had not allowed herself to feel in years. The chamber door slid open behind her. And for the first time, Malar didn't hide from the world outside. She turned toward the light, and waited for him to walk beside her. The walk back through the living corridor felt different now. The walls no longer pulsed with challenge. Instead, the light seemed calm, almost welcoming. Malar walked a little ahead at first, her steps careful and slow. But every few seconds, she glanced over her shoulder to make sure the human was still there. It wasn't fear of him leaving. It was fear that this moment might vanish, like waking from a dream too good to be real. When they reached the end of the path, the great root door unsealed with a long, echoing hiss. The Hall of Echoes waited on the other side. But this time, it wasn't silent. The moment you stepped out beside Malar, the court erupted into chaos. Gasps. Whispers. Flashes of bioluminescent shock bursting across their skin. Some nobles stepped back as though they had just seen a forbidden miracle. Others leaned forward, eyes wide, watching as if the universe had rewritten itself in front of them. Varasha, standing near the queen's throne, covered her mouth with both hands. Her glow brightened so fast it almost flickered white. "You returned," she whispered, rushing toward Malar. "Both of you." Malar's voice was soft. The path accepted him. Varasha's glow flickered again, joy, disbelief, relief all mixed into one. She turned toward the queen with trembling pride. Queen Seralith stood from her throne. Slowly. Deliberately. The room fell silent at once. Every noble lowered their eyes as her presence filled the hall like a storm beginning to form. She walked down the steps with the weight of centuries behind each step. Her voice was calm, but powerful. The path of resonance does not bend. It does not choose lightly. It does not honor those who lie or those who act from pity. She looked at the human. And yet it allowed you to pass. Her gaze slid to Malar. And it accepted your essence beside his. The court stirred with anxious whispers. Some nobles glowed with anger. Others with curiosity. A few with stunned admiration. The queen raised her staff, and the room dimmed instantly. "Human. Step forward." He did. Malar of the Silver Line. "Step forward." She joined him, standing only a breath away. Close enough that he could feel the faint warmth of her bioluminescent skin. Seralith studied them both, searching for something unseen. "Do you understand," she said slowly, "what this test means? The path does not merely test compatibility. It tests truth. It tests strength. It tests whether two lives can stand together under the weight of our customs." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "If one of you faltered, the bond would collapse." Malar's hands tightened at her sides. The queen's voice softened, not much, but enough to be noticed. And yet, it held. Gasps echoed across the chamber. A starborn elder near the front whispered, "Impossible." Another muttered, "Unprecedented." Seralitha's markings glowed with ancient authority as she lifted her staff high. "By the old rites, by the resonance of the path, and by the truth shown in this hall, this potential union is acknowledged." The hall shook with murmurs. Some noble males looked furious. Others confused. A few simply stunned. Varasha nearly burst with joy, her glow fluttering like wild starlight. But Malar didn't move. She kept her eyes on the ground for a heartbeat. Then slowly lifted her gaze toward the human beside her. Her expression was different now. Not guarded. Not ashamed. Not resigned. She looked at him like she was beginning to see something new. A possibility she never allowed herself to imagine. Queen Seralith stepped closer, her voice low. "The court will judge your intentions in full. But the path has made its choice first." She turned toward the crowd. "Let the Starborn witness this moment." The hall flooded with light. Some supportive. Some angry. Some simply trying to understand. And through it all, Malar remained by his side. Not hidden behind her cousin. Not lowered in shame. But standing in the center of the hall like someone reclaiming a piece of herself. Her quiet voice reached him through the noise. "I did not think anyone would walk through that path for me." He answered softly, "Then I'm glad I proved someone wrong." A soft, warm light flickered along Malar's cheeks. The closest thing her people had to a blush. And for the first time that night, she didn't hide it. The hall slowly quieted as Queen Seralith raised both hands. The glow along her arms brightened in long, steady waves, signals of authority older than any living starborn in the chamber. "Silence," she commanded. The word echoed through the crystal structure and rolled across the nobles like a physical force. Even the restless lights on their skin dimmed. She turned her gaze toward the human, then toward Malar. But her eyes lingered longer on Malar, as if the queen was searching her soul. "Malar of the Silver Line," Seralith said, voice steady, "your years have been marked by service, patience, and dignity. You have never broken your duty to this court." Malar lowered her head slightly, not in shame, but in respect. "But," the queen continued, "you have carried the weight of silence for too long. It was not your age that dimmed you. It was the blindness of those around you." Whispers swept through the hall. Several nobles shifted in discomfort. Some looked away. Malar stood perfectly still, but her breath unsteady, as if the queen's words were loosening chains she had worn for half a lifetime. Then the queen turned to the human. "And you," she said. "A stranger to our customs. A being from a young world. A species known for chaos and courage." Her tone was not praise. It was observation, sharp, almost scientific. "You stepped forward without hesitation. You accepted the path without understanding the danger. And you faced the heartstone with truth." The human met her gaze without flinching. "Tell this court," Seralith said, "did you act for glory? For reward? For some personal desire?" He shook his head. "No. I acted because it felt wrong to stay silent." The queen's glow flickered, a reaction so small that only the closest nobles noticed. But the hall felt it. The air changed. The floor seemed to vibrate in approval. The court erupted into arguments again. "He is reckless. He is honest. He cannot bond with a starborn. The path accepted him. It is unnatural. It is a sign." Queen Seralith lifted her staff and slammed it against the floor. The entire hall fell silent instantly. Her voice lowered into a tone that felt older than the structure around them. "The path of resonance has existed since the dawn of our ancestors. It does not accept dishonor. It does not accept shadows. It does not accept half-truths." She paused, letting that ancient meaning sink in. It accepted him. Light rippled across the ceiling like a wave passing through a giant creature. Then Seralith's expression softened just slightly as she looked at Malar again. "And it accepted you beside him." Malar's eyes widened, not in shock, but in something deeper, something that made the glow in her markings warm and gentle. A few nobles gasped. Others looked horrified. Some watched with a strange, unfolding awe. Varasha nearly burst with joy beside her cousin. Her glow brightened so fast it almost flickered white. Queen Seralith stepped closer to them both. "Before the court of the Starborn, I must ask the final question." Her staff hummed as she planted it between them. "Human," she said quietly, "do you commit to stand with Malar, not for a moment, not for pity, but for the bond our rights demand?" "I do." His voice did not shake. Then Seralith turned to Malar. "And Malar, do you accept the one who stepped forward when all others would not?" The hall waited. Varasha squeezed her hands in anxious hope. And Malar, who had spent years shrinking herself, years hiding her quiet loneliness, years accepting silence as her companion, finally lifted her head and looked at the human without fear. Her voice was steady. Soft. Whole. I accept. Light burst across the hall, waves of gold, silver, and violet, an ancient reaction from the living structure itself. The court reacted in shock as the hall answered the queen's verdict. Some nobles bowed their heads. Some clenched their fists. Some glowed in unfamiliar admiration. Queen Serelith struck her staff against the floor one final time. Then by the laws of our ancestors, she said, this bond is recognized. A hush fell across the massive chamber. Malar inhaled, slow and deep. For the first time in her life, she didn't look small. She didn't look overlooked. She didn't look forgotten. She stood tall beside the human. Varasha's glow flickered with tears she tried to hide. And the court, whether they liked it or not, witnessed a moment that would echo through starborn history. A moment where a human's courage changed the fate of someone who had already accepted her own silence. The queen stepped back, letting the hall breathe again. And Malar turned slightly toward the human, her voice almost a whisper. I never thought someone would choose me in front of them. He answered gently. Then I'm glad I did. Her markings glowed with a warm pulse. She didn't look away. Not anymore. The hall of echoes slowly emptied, its bright lights dimming back to their calm, natural glow. The nobles drifted away in uneasy clusters, some whispering, some furious, some strangely thoughtful. But Malar and the human stayed where they were, standing together in the quiet aftermath. For the first time since the ceremony began, Malar wasn't hiding behind lowered eyes or tight shoulders. She held her posture with quiet strength, her markings glowing in a soft, steady rhythm. It was the mark of someone reclaiming the parts of herself she once believed were lost. Varasha hugged her cousin one last time before leaving them. Her voice trembled with joy. You deserve this, Malar. More than anyone knows. Then she retreated toward the queen, leaving the two of them alone beneath the towering crystal arches. A warm silence settled between them. Malar turned slowly, her violet eyes reflecting the hall's fading light. I do not know how to thank you, she said softly. What you did, it was more than courage. It didn't feel like courage, he replied. It just felt right. Her markings flickered gently, something like a shy smile in starborn body language. She stepped closer, not quite touching him, but close enough that he could feel the faint warmth radiating from her skin. Most would not face the path, she whispered. Not for me. He shook his head. Most people don't see what I saw. Malar blinked, surprised. What did you see? A woman who deserved better. The glow along her collarbone brightened, soft, warm, alive. For a starborn, that was a sign of deep emotion, deeper than she was used to showing. They walked slowly toward the rear corridor where the hall opened into a quieter passage. The air there was cooler, still humming faintly with the energy of ancient rites. As they reached the threshold, Malar paused. Human, her voice grew quieter, almost hesitant. May I ask you something? He nodded. She glanced at the glowing door behind them, the entrance to the path that had accepted him when it rejected so many starborn males. Her voice trembled just slightly, not with fear, but with something more uncertain. The path has turned away warriors, scholars, even those who trained their whole lives for the resonance. It has rejected many who are far stronger than me, far more fitting than I have ever been told I am. She looked at him directly, violet eyes steady and searching. So why did the path choose you? He opened his mouth to answer, but no words came. Not yet. Because the truth wasn't simple. It wasn't just bravery. It wasn't pity. It wasn't desire or pride. The path had sensed something else, something deeper. Malar watched him, waiting, her expression open in a way that made her look both powerful and vulnerable at the same time. He finally spoke, voice low. I think the path chose me because. He paused, searching for the right words. Because it saw something in both of us that everyone else missed. Malar inhaled slowly. The glow spreading through her markings was soft and full, like dawn warming over dark water. What did it see? She whispered. He stepped closer, so close her light reflected in his eyes. That neither of us were meant to stand alone. The corridor fell silent. Malar stared at him, breath caught, expression changed in a way he couldn't fully read, surprise, wonder, and something deeper, something she was only beginning to understand. For a long moment, they simply stood there, two lives from two different worlds connected by something ancient and unseen. Then, from the far end of the corridor, a gentle hum resonated through the floor. Malar stiffened. Her markings dimmed in concern. That sound, she murmured. It only rises when the path senses a new shift. Something, beginning. He looked toward the glowing hallway, feeling a faint chill dance across his spine. What does it mean? He asked. Malar shook her head, voice barely above a whisper. I do not know. But whatever comes next, it involves us. Their eyes met again. And the path hummed deeper, as if calling to them. As if the first trial had only been the beginning.